The late afternoon light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hartwell Contemporary Gallery, turning everything it touched into liquid gold. Olivia Reed moved through the space with practiced efficiency, adjusting the angle of a spotlight until it hit the centerpiece sculpture just right, the metal catching fire in the beam. Her worn heels clicked against the polished concrete floor, each step echoing in the emptiness before the evening's chaos would descend. She stepped back, tilting her head to assess her work. Perfect. Not that her boss would notice. Richard Hartwell had a remarkable talent for taking credit for her curation choices while simultaneously finding fault with her execution. 4 years as assistant manager, 4 years of watching him shake hands and accept praise for exhibitions she'd spent months planning, and she was still making barely enough to cover rent. Barely being the operative word, actually. Olivia's phone buzzed in her pocket. She already knew who it was. Her landlord had the persistence of a bill collector, which she supposed was exactly what he was. She pulled out the device, the screen glaring up at her with a number she'd been avoiding for 3 days. Miss Reed, this is the 3rd message I've left. The rent increase takes effect next month, $400 additional per month. If this is going to be a problem, I need to know now. $400. It might as well have been $4,000. She was already splitting her meals between coffee for breakfast and whatever she could scrape together for dinner. Her student loans took 1/3 of her paycheck, rent took another half, and what remained was a cruel joke that usually involved choosing between electricity and eating. She'd tried for a personal loan last month, bad credit from late payments last year when she'd caught pneumonia and missed 2 weeks of work without paid sick leave. No cosigner. Her Aunt Patricia certainly wasn't going to help, not without holding it over her head for the next decade. She was out of moves, out of options, out of time. Olivia, the champagne flutes go on the west table, not the east. We've discussed this. She turned to find Hartwell striding through the gallery, his suit probably worth more than her monthly salary, his expression radiating the particular irritation of a man who'd never worried about money a day in his life. "Of course," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I'll move them." He didn't thank her. He never did. He was already on his phone, confirming attendance with someone important, someone who mattered, someone who wasn't her. The exhibition opening tonight was significant. Emerging artists, the kind of raw, hungry talent that reminded Olivia why she'd fallen in love with art in the first place. She'd found 3 of the 5 artists herself, spent hours convincing Hartwell they were worth the risk. He'd agreed, eventually, and would spend tonight telling collectors that he'd discovered them, that his eye for potential was unmatched. She moved the champagne flutes. The gallery began filling an hour later, the usual crowd of wealthy collectors and art enthusiasts who treated openings like social obligations. Olivia worked the room's edges, refilling glasses, answering questions about technique and inspiration, invisible in the way staff always were. She'd worn her best dress, a vintage piece she'd found at a thrift store and altered herself, deep navy with a flattering cut. It wasn't designer, but it was hers, and she'd paired it with her grandmother's silver locket, the only jewelry she owned that meant anything. She was adjusting a lighting fixture when the energy in the room shifted. It was subtle, the way conversations paused mid-sentence, the way eyes tracked toward the entrance. Olivia glanced up and saw him. Tall, dark-haired, moving through the crowded gallery with the kind of quiet confidence that suggested he owned every space he entered. His suit was impeccable, charcoal gray and perfectly tailored, the kind of fit that cost thousands of dollars. But it was his face that caught her attention. Sharp angles, a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow, and eyes the color of a winter storm, gray-blue and intense as they scanned the room. He was looking at the art, actually looking, not performing interest for an audience. His gaze lingered on pieces others had dismissed, his expression thoughtful, assessing. There was something solitary about him, despite the crowd, something that suggested he preferred it that way. Olivia found herself watching him move through the space, stopping in front of a canvas she particularly loved, an abstract piece by an artist barely out of art school. The painting was chaos and order simultaneously, violence and beauty. Most people hated it. He stared at it for 3 full minutes. Interesting choice. The words were out of her mouth before she'd decided to speak. He turned, and the full force of his attention was startling. Up close, he was even more striking, though there was a guardedness in his expression, a wall that suggested he was used to people wanting something from him. "You think so?" His voice was low, measured, with an edge of curiosity that felt genuine. "Most people don't give it more than 30 seconds, Olivia admitted. They find it aggressive." "It is aggressive," he agreed. "It's also honest. The artist isn't trying to be palatable." He tilted his head slightly. "You curated this exhibition." It wasn't a question. Olivia blinked, surprised. "What makes you say that?" "Because Hartwell's taste runs toward the safely provocative." "This," he gestured at the painting, "this takes risks. It's raw. Someone who actually cares about art made these choices." Something warm unfurled in Olivia's chest, dangerous and welcome. "Thank you," she said quietly. His rare smile transformed his entire face, softening the sharp edges. "I'm the one who should be thanking you. I haven't seen anything this genuine in years." They stood there, the noise of the gallery fading into background static. And for a moment, Olivia forgot about rent and loans and the crushing weight of barely surviving. For a moment, she was just a woman talking to a striking man about art they both loved. Then reality crashed back in the form of a voice she knew too well. "Olivia, darling, you're here." Aunt Patricia swept through the crowd like a perfumed hurricane, blonde hair perfectly styled, designer dress clinging to her yoga-toned frame, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. Her smile was wide and fake, the kind that never reached her cold blue eyes. "Aunt Patricia," Olivia managed, her stomach sinking, "I didn't know you were coming." "I wouldn't miss it. Supporting the arts is so important." Patricia's gaze had already moved past Olivia, landing on the man beside her with laser focus. Recognition flashed across her face, sharp and predatory. "And you must be Julian Mercer. I've been hoping to meet you, Patricia Reed Hartley." Julian? Julian Mercer? The name sparked recognition even through Olivia's embarrassment. Tech entrepreneur, Forbes features, the kind of wealth that made Hartwell's collectors look middle class. "Ms. Reed Hartley," Julian said, his tone polite, but notably cooler than it had been moments before. "Please, call me Patricia. You know, I was just reading about your latest acquisition. Fascinating business strategy. We simply must discuss it over drinks sometime." Patricia touched his arm, her fingers lingering, her body angled toward him in a way that was unmistakably flirtatious. Olivia wanted to disappear, to sink through the polished concrete and cease existing. She watched her aunt monopolize Julian, dropping names and laughing too loudly, performing charm with the desperation of someone who needed to be seen, to be wanted, to matter. Julian's expression remained neutral, but Olivia caught the tightness around his eyes, the way he'd stepped back slightly, creating distance Patricia kept trying to close. "If you'll excuse me," Olivia said quietly, but neither of them seemed to hear her. She escaped to the small fire escape accessible through the back office, the cool evening air a relief against her burning face. The city sprawled below, indifferent to her humiliation, to the fact that her aunt had just treated a conversation about art like a networking opportunity, had reduced something genuine to a transaction. Her phone buzzed. The landlord again. She stared at the message, vision blurring slightly. $400, due in 3 weeks. No options, no moves left. "Your aunt is persistent." Olivia spun around. Julian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I told her I needed air," he continued, stepping onto the fire escape. "I hope you don't mind the company." "I'm so sorry," Olivia said immediately. "She's always like that. I didn't—" "You're nothing like her." The words were simple, direct, and Olivia felt something shift in her chest. They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the gallery muted behind them, the city humming below. "Have dinner with me tomorrow," Julian said. Olivia stared at him. What? Dinner, tomorrow night. His gray-blue eyes held hers, intent and oddly vulnerable. "Because you're the first person in 5 years who looked at me and saw a person, not a bank account." Before she could process the words, before she could form a response, Patricia's voice drifted from inside, calling Olivia's name with thinly veiled impatience. Julian pulled a card from his jacket, pressing it into her hand. His fingers were warm, steady. Then he was gone, disappearing back into the gallery, leaving Olivia standing alone on the fire escape, holding a business card that felt like a door to somewhere impossible. The following evening, Olivia stood in her tiny studio apartment, staring at Julian's card on the counter like it might detonate. Her phone sat next to it, screen dark, accusing. She'd picked it up 17 times in the past hour, typed messages ranging from polite acceptance to elaborate explanations of why this was a terrible idea, and deleted every single one. Men like Julian Mercer didn't date women like her. It was a fundamental law of the universe, like gravity or entropy. He existed in penthouses and boardrooms, wore watches that cost more than her yearly salary, moved through a world where $400 was a rounding error, not a catastrophe. But he'd looked at her like she mattered, like her thoughts on art were valuable, not decorative, like she was someone worth knowing. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed 3 different outfits, all inadequate. The navy dress from last night, a simple black sheath with a discreet stain near the hem, a floral sundress, better suited for brunch than whatever this was. She settled on the black dress, paired it with her grandmother's locket, watched a makeup tutorial on her phone with shaking hands. At 6:45, she typed a simple message. "Yes, thank you for the invitation." His response was immediate. "Car will pick you up at 7. I'm glad you said yes." No restaurant name, no details, just certainty, as if her acceptance had never been in question. The car that arrived was sleek and black, the kind with tinted windows and a driver in a suit. Olivia felt acutely aware of her building's chipped paint and broken intercom as she climbed into leather seats that probably cost more than her couch. The city blurred past the windows as they drove upward, literally upward, to a part of Manhattan where the buildings scraped clouds and the streets gleamed. The car stopped at a tower of glass and steel, and the driver opened her door with a polite nod. "Top floor, miss. Mr. Mercer is expecting you." The elevator ride felt eternal. Olivia watched the numbers climb, her heart rate matching the ascent. The doors opened onto a private restaurant, intimate and impossibly elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city lights like a living painting. There were only 6 tables. Julian stood at one by the window, and when he saw her, that rare, genuine smile transformed his face. "You came," he said, as if he genuinely worried she wouldn't. "You didn't exactly give me an address to refuse," Olivia replied, surprising herself with the lightness in her voice. He laughed, a sound that seemed to catch him off guard. "Fair point. I have a habit of being controlling. I'm working on it." Dinner was surreal. The menu had no prices, just descriptions of dishes that sounded more like poetry than food. Julian ordered wine that the sommelier presented like a religious artifact. And yet, despite the opulence, despite the absurdity of her worn dress in this temple of wealth, Julian talked to her like they were sitting in a diner. They discussed art, the suffering artist mythology, whether beauty required pain or if that was just what people told themselves to justify cruelty. He listened when she spoke, actually listened, his gray-blue eyes focused entirely on her face. Then, between the main course and dessert, he shifted. His expression grew serious, calculated, and Olivia felt the temperature drop despite the wine warming her blood. "I need to be transparent about something," Julian said carefully. "I have a charity gala in 2 weeks. It's important, socially and professionally. I'd like you to come with me." Olivia set down her wineglass. "You're asking me out to ask me to a gala? I know how it sounds." He leaned forward slightly, and there was something vulnerable in the gesture. "I'm tired, Olivia. Tired of women who date me for connections, for social climbing, for what they can extract. You didn't even know who I was last night. That's rare. That's valuable. So, this is... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't name what this was becoming. A proposal, Julian said bluntly. Attend a few events with me. Be yourself. No performance required, no pretending to be something you're not. In exchange, I'll pay off your student loans. The room tilted. That's insane. You don't even know me. I know enough. You need help. I need authenticity. This is a transaction that benefits both of us. His voice was calm, businesslike, as if he were negotiating a merger rather than her financial future. Olivia's mind raced. Her student loans were $60,000 of weight she carried everywhere, a number that grew despite her payments, interest compounding like a punishment for wanting education. $60,000 of freedom, offered by a man she'd met yesterday. Just a few events, she heard herself say. Then we're even. Then we're even, Julian agreed, but his eyes held something that suggested even he didn't believe it. The following weekend arrived faster than Olivia expected. Julian had texted her an address, a time, and a simple instruction: wear something you feel confident in. She wore the navy vintage dress again. It was all she had. The gallery opening was at a competitor space, modern and cold, where Hartwell was warm, all white walls and conceptual installations. Julian picked her up himself this time, driving a car that purred like a satisfied cat, and when he saw her, his gaze lingered in a way that made her skin warm. "You look beautiful," he said, simply. Inside, the art crowd was predictable. Olivia recognized faces from her own gallery openings, collectors who'd never bothered learning her name. But tonight, walking in with Julian's hand resting lightly on the small of her back, proprietary but gentle, everything changed. Whispers followed them, heads turned. She caught fragments of conversation. Who is she? I've never seen her before. Julian Mercer doesn't date. Wesley, her coworker and best friend, nearly dropped his champagne flute when he spotted her. His eyes went comically wide, darting between Olivia and Julian like he was watching a tennis match. She'd have to explain later. God, what would she even say? "Breathe," murmured near her ear, his thumb stroking her spine in small, soothing circles. "You belong here as much as anyone." The lie was kind. She didn't belong here at all. But with his solid presence beside her, his dry humor making her genuinely laugh at someone's pretentious analysis of a blank canvas, she could almost believe it. They gravitated toward a balcony over the city, escaping the crowd's noise. The October air was cool, and Julian shrugged out of his jacket without asking, draping it over her shoulders. It smelled like him, cedar and something expensive, and Olivia had to resist the urge to bury her face in the fabric. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for tonight, for making this bearable." "It's not supposed to be bearable," Julian replied, leaning against the railing beside her. "It's supposed to be enjoyable." "Has to be. If it's not, we're doing it wrong." Their eyes met, and the space between them felt charged, electric. He was close enough that she could see the scar through his eyebrow clearly, close enough that she wondered absently what had caused it. His gaze dropped to her lips, and her breath caught. He leaned in, closer. The world narrowed to the inches between them, to the anticipation crackling in the air like a living thing. "Julian, there you are." The voice shattered the moment like a stone through glass. They stepped apart, and Olivia's heart was a wild thing in her chest. A woman in a severe black dress was waving from the doorway, someone important based on her imperious expression. "I should..." Julian started, frustration clear in the tight line of his jaw. "Go," Olivia finished. "It's fine." It wasn't fine. She was shaking, but she smiled anyway, and he looked at her like he wanted to ignore the summons entirely before duty dragged him away. Olivia stayed on the balcony, trying to calm her racing pulse, trying to understand what had just almost happened. This was supposed to be an arrangement, a transaction, simple and controlled. Nothing about the way her body was responding to Julian Mercer felt simple. She turned to go back inside and nearly collided with someone in the doorway. Aunt Patricia, looking immaculate in designer everything, her expression frozen in surprise that quickly morphed into something calculating. "Olivia, darling, what a surprise seeing you here, with Julian Mercer, no less." Patricia's smile was sharp as a blade. "You didn't mention you knew him." "It's new," Olivia managed. "How wonderful. You know, I had the most interesting conversation with Margaret Mercer at the Arts Council luncheon yesterday. Julian's mother, such a formidable woman. We discovered we have mutual friends in the Hampton set. She mentioned Julian might be bringing someone to his father's birthday celebration." Patricia's eyes glittered. "I do hope you'll both come to my dinner party next Friday. I insist." Before Olivia could form an excuse, Julian materialized beside her. His hand found hers, fingers lacing together in a gesture that felt both possessive and protective. "Patricia," he said coolly, "we'll check our schedule." After Patricia glided away, trailing expensive perfume and thinly veiled threats, Julian turned to Olivia. The carefully controlled mask had slipped, and she saw something raw underneath. "The gala, in 2 weeks," he said quietly. "It's not just any event. It's my father's 70th birthday, at the family estate in the Hamptons. My mother has been persistent about me bringing someone appropriate." The weight of appropriate hung between them. "I haven't been back there in 5 years," Julian continued, and his voice held decades of pain. "I can't do it alone." Olivia understood loneliness. She understood family that felt like obligation rather than love. She looked at this powerful, guarded man and saw her own isolation reflected back. "Okay," she whispered. "There's more," Julian said. 3 days at the estate. It'll be hell, but I'll cover your rent increase for a year, and your student loans. And, Olivia," he paused, vulnerable in a way that made her chest ache. "I think I'd like to actually get to know you, properly." This was insane. This was more than she'd agreed to. This was dangerous, in ways that had nothing to do with money. "Your family will eat me alive," Olivia said. "They're piranhas." Julian's grip on her hand tightened. "But I'll be right there." She should say no. Every rational part of her brain screamed to walk away, to not get tangled in whatever complicated web this was becoming. 3 days, she agreed. His smile was relief, and something deeper, something that looked almost like hope. The days between the gallery opening and Patricia's dinner party blurred together in a haze of anxiety and obsessive research. Olivia sat cross-legged on her bed at 2 in the morning, laptop glowing in the darkness, falling down the rabbit hole of Julian Mercer's public life. There were articles about Mercer Tech, his meteoric rise from nothing to a company valued at $500 million. Profiles that described him as brilliant, driven, ruthless in business, but fair. Photos of him at charity events, always alone, his expression carefully neutral. And then, buried 6 pages deep in her search results, she found it. An engagement announcement from 5 years ago. Julian Mercer and Caroline Ashworth, smiling for the camera, her hand displaying a massive diamond, his arm around her waist. The caption mentioned prominent families, a union of old money and new innovation. Olivia searched for a wedding announcement and found nothing, just silence. And then, articles about Julian's company exploding in growth, about his estrangement from his family, about the self-made billionaire who trusted no one. She wondered what had happened, wondered what kind of pain carved the careful walls she saw in his eyes. Her phone buzzed with a text from Wesley. "Lunch tomorrow. You're explaining everything or I'm staging an intervention." She smiled despite her exhaustion. Wesley deserved answers. She wasn't sure she had any that made sense. Friday evening arrived with the weight of an execution date. Patricia's townhouse stood in the West Village, all historic charm and expensive renovations, the kind of place that screamed old money, even though Patricia's wealth was entirely borrowed from ex-husbands. Olivia arrived early, alone, as instructed. Julian was meeting her there, some work crisis requiring his attention. She immediately, immediately regretted not insisting they arrive together. The other guests were already present. Patricia's carefully curated collection of society wives and successful divorcees, women who measured their worth in designer labels and strategic marriages. They assessed Olivia with the precision of jewelers examining a cubic zirconia presented as a diamond. "Olivia, darling," Patricia descended, air-kissing near Olivia's cheeks without actually making contact. "That's a lovely dress. Vintage, isn't it?" The word vintage dripped with condescension, a polite way of saying second-hand, cheap, inadequate. "It is," Olivia replied, refusing to feel ashamed. "I altered it myself." "How resourceful." Patricia's smile was poisonous. "Everyone, this is my niece Olivia. She works at a gallery, assistant manager." The emphasis on assistant was deliberate, diminishing. The doorbell saved her from further dissection. Patricia's entire demeanor transformed, her face lighting with predatory excitement as she rushed to answer it. Julian stood in the doorway, and Olivia's breath caught despite knowing he was coming. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. And when his gray-blue eyes found hers across the room, something in her chest loosened. "Julian, how wonderful you could make it," Patricia practically purred, her hand immediately finding his arm, her body angling toward him in blatant invitation. Come in, let me introduce you to everyone." Olivia watched her aunt work, monopolizing Julian's attention, laughing too loudly at things that weren't funny, touching him at every opportunity. The other women watched with calculating interest, mental scorecards updating in real time. Julian remained polite but distant, his responses measured and cool. Dinner was orchestrated torture. Patricia had arranged the seating with surgical precision. Herself beside Julian at the head of the table, Olivia across from them, positioned to watch her aunt's performance with perfect clarity. The meal was elaborate, courses arriving with pretentious descriptions, wine flowing freely. "So, Julian," Patricia leaned closer, her voice carrying across the table, "I've been reading about your latest acquisition. Such brilliant strategy. You simply must tell me how you identified the opportunity." Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Market analysis, due diligence, the usual process." "So modest." Patricia's hand rested on his forearm, her fingers stroking the fabric of his suit. "I find success so attractive. Don't you think ambition is the most appealing quality in a partner?" Olivia focused on her wineglass, the crystal catching candlelight, anything to avoid witnessing her aunt's humiliating display. This was what Patricia did, what she'd always done. She competed, with friends, with strangers, with her own niece. Nothing was sacred, no relationship safe from her desperate need to win. "I think integrity matters more than ambition," Julian said, his voice cooling several degrees. "Ambition without character is just selfishness with better marketing." The table fell silent. Patricia's smile froze, brittle as thin ice. After dinner, Olivia escaped to Patricia's library, a room her aunt never used but maintained for appearances. She stood by the window, looking out at the manicured garden, trying to breathe through the tightness in her chest. "Found you." Julian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He closed the door behind him, muffling the sounds of the other guests, and suddenly the room felt very small. "I'm sorry," Olivia said immediately. "She's awful. I know she's awful. I should have warned you more clearly. She's not your responsibility." Julian crossed to where she stood, and the warmth of his proximity made her skin prickle with awareness. "Olivia, I need to tell you something about why I haven't dated in 5 years, about why this arrangement matters." She turned to face him, and his expression was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "My ex-fiancée was named Caroline. She was from my parents' world, the kind of woman they approved of. We were together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. His voice was carefully controlled, but pain bled through the edges. She cheated with my business partner. They were stealing from the company together, siphoning money for months. When I found out, when I confronted them, she said it was my fault, that I was never around, always working on my little company. Olivia's heart cracked. Julian. My parents sided with her, he continued, the words coming faster now, like poison being purged. They said I was embarrassing the family with my technology phase, that I needed to grow up and join the real family business, that Caroline had every right to seek companionship elsewhere when I was being so selfish. He laughed, sharp and bitter. They tried to buy me out of my own company, wanted to fold it into their investment portfolio, take control. I refused, left the estate, haven't been back since. That's why you stopped trusting people, Olivia whispered. Everyone wants something, Julian agreed. Money, status, connections. You're the first person in 5 years who looked at me and saw past all of it. She understood then, understood the walls, the careful distance, the transactional approach to something that was becoming decidedly not transactional. He was as terrified as she was. I've been alone since I was 19, Olivia said quietly. My parents died in a car accident.
No warning, no goodbye. Just a phone call in my freshman dorm. Patricia took me in because family obligation demanded it, but she never let me forget what I cost her. Every meal, every roof over my head, every kindness came with a price tag made of guilt. Julian's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. Everyone I've ever loved has either died or used me, Olivia continued, the confession scraping her throat raw. So yes, I understand walls. I understand being afraid to trust. I understand transactions feeling safer than feelings. I won't use you, Julian said, his voice low and fierce, and I'm not going anywhere. The promise hung between them, fragile and terrifying and desperately wanted. A knock on the door shattered the moment. Patricia's voice called sweetly, "Is everything all right in there?" They stepped apart, the spell broken but not forgotten. Julian's thumb brushed across Olivia's knuckles before he released her hand. "We should go back," he murmured. As they left the library, Patricia intercepted them in the hallway, her expression sharp despite the wine-softened edges. "Julian, must you leave so soon? The night is young, and we were having such a lovely conversation earlier." "Actually," Julian said, his voice polite but final, "Olivia and I have an early morning tomorrow. We should be going." "Both of you?" Patricia's eyes narrowed, jealousy flashing undisguised across her features. "Yes, thank you for dinner." Julian's hand found the small of Olivia's back, guiding her toward the door. In his car, rain beginning to spatter against the windshield, the tension that had been building all evening reached a breaking point. Julian's hands gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight, and Olivia could feel the words he wasn't saying pressing against the silence. 3 days, she said softly, "at your family's estate? You're sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure I can't do it without you." He turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest ache. "My mother is going to be worse than Patricia. She's strategic, calculating. She'll test you, try to break you. And my father?" His voice cracked slightly. "He hasn't spoken to me in 5 years, except through lawyers." "Why are you going at all?" "Because my sister asked me to." Julian's expression softened marginally. "Victoria, she's the only one in that family who's worth a damn. She's been caught between me and our parents for years. This matters to her." Olivia nodded. "Then we'll survive it together." They sat in the rain-soaked silence, the city blurring beyond the windows, and Julian's hand reached across the console to find hers. His thumb traced patterns on her skin, absent and intimate, and Olivia felt the careful distance between them crumbling like sandcastles at high tide. "Olivia," he said quietly, "this stopped being simple the moment I met you." She looked at him, at the careful walls showing cracks, at the loneliness she recognized because it matched her own. He leaned closer, and she could smell cedar and rain, could see the silver flecks in his gray-blue eyes. His hand came up, cupping her face with devastating gentleness, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. She couldn't. She didn't want to. His lips brushed hers, feather-light, a question. She answered by closing the distance, and the kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the desperate passion she'd expected.
It was careful, almost reverent, like he was afraid she might break. When they pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Julian rested his forehead against hers. 3 days, he repeated, starting next Friday. After that, we figure out what this is. After that, Olivia agreed, though she suspected they both already knew. The week before the estate weekend passed in a blur of preparation and mounting anxiety. 2 days after Patricia's disastrous dinner party, Julian texted Olivia an address in Soho with a single instruction: "Meet me at 11. Trust me." The boutique was the kind of place that didn't display prices, where mannequins wore art and salespeople assessed your net worth with a glance. Olivia stood on the sidewalk, her reflection in the window showing every inadequacy, and considered fleeing. Julian emerged before she could act on the impulse. "You came." "You're making a habit of sounding surprised by that," Olivia replied. His smile was quick, genuine. "Maybe I'm still not used to people showing up." Inside, the boutique manager greeted Julian by name, and Olivia realized this visit had been planned, orchestrated. Dresses in jewel tones hung like promises, fabrics that whispered wealth with every movement. "Julian, I can't afford." "This isn't charity," he interrupted gently. "This is armor. My family judges everything, and I won't let them use your clothes as ammunition. Please, let me do this." The please broke her resistance. For the next 2 hours, she tried on dresses that cost more than her monthly rent, each one transforming her into someone who might belong in his world. Julian sat in a leather chair, his laptop open but ignored, his attention fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin warm. The emerald green evening gown made him go completely still. The fabric clung and flowed simultaneously, the neckline elegant without being revealing, the color making her hazel eyes luminous. "That one," Julian said, his voice rough. "Definitely that one." When the saleswoman went to package it, Julian stood, crossing to where Olivia still wore the gown. His fingers found the zipper, and the brush of his knuckles against her spine as he slowly drew it up made her breath catch. Their eyes met in the mirror, and the air between them crackled with everything unspoken. "You're beautiful," he murmured. "You know that, right?" She didn't, had never felt it, but the way he looked at her made her almost believe. The night before they left for the Hamptons, Olivia arrived at Julian's penthouse with coffee and her laptop, ostensibly to review some gallery proposals she'd been working on. The space was exactly what she'd imagined: floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city, furniture in shades of charcoal and cream, everything perfectly placed and nothing personal. Except the walls. Every available surface held art, contemporary pieces from artists she recognized as emerging talents, the kind who couldn't afford gallery representation yet. Julian collected what moved him, not what appreciated in value. "These are incredible," she breathed, stopping in front of a chaotic abstract that reminded her of controlled violence. "I buy what speaks to me," Julian said, setting down his own coffee. "Status and investment value are meaningless if the art doesn't make you feel something." They worked in comfortable silence, Olivia on his couch reviewing artist submissions, Julian at his desk coding something she didn't understand. Hours passed unmarked, and she found herself watching him, the way he focused completely on his screen, the absent gesture of running his hand through his hair when frustrated. Near midnight, he closed his laptop with a decisive click. "Tell me something true." The request was unexpected, vulnerable. Olivia set aside her work. "What do you want to know?" "Your dream, the one you don't tell people because they'll call it impractical." She hesitated, then let the words spill out. "I want to open my own gallery, small, focused on emerging artists, especially those from difficult backgrounds. There'd be a coffee shop attached, a community space where art is accessible, not elite. I'd call it Second Chances." She laughed, self-deprecating. "Told you it was impractical." Julian's expression was intent, serious. "That's not impractical. That's brilliant. Why haven't you done it?" "Money, experience, terror." Olivia shrugged. "Take your pick." "You'd be incredible at that," Julian said quietly. "You see people, really see them. That's rare." The conviction in his voice made her throat tight. "What about you? If money wasn't an object, if you could walk away from Mercer Tech tomorrow, what would you do?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I built the company to prove something to my parents, to prove I didn't need them. But now it's this massive thing, and I'm not sure I even like it anymore. I'm good at it. That's not the same as loving it." "What did you love before all this?" "Architecture." The answer came immediately, surprising him. "I wanted to design buildings, create spaces that made people feel something. My parents said it was a hobby, not a career, so I buried it." They looked at each other across the dim penthouse, two people who'd shaped their lives around other people's expectations, and Olivia felt the ground shift beneath her. Friday morning arrived with gray skies, and Olivia's stomach in knots. Julian picked her up at 9, driving himself in a vintage car that probably belonged in a museum. The drive to the Hamptons would take 2 hours, and she'd never been more aware of enclosed spaces. He'd brought coffee, her order memorized without her having told him. The gesture was small and devastating. "Talk to me," Julian said as they merged onto the highway. "You're radiating anxiety." "I'm about to spend 3 days with people who'll hate me on principle," Olivia replied. "I'm allowed anxiety." "They won't hate you." His hand found hers over the gear shift, warm and steady. They laughed despite herself. "You're delusional." "Maybe, but I'm right." They stopped at a roadside diner an hour into the drive, Julian's choice. Watching him in a $3,000 suit eating pancakes at a Formica counter, completely unself-conscious, Olivia felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. "Why do I feel like I've known you longer than 3 weeks?" she asked. Julian's eyes met hers, gray-blue and unguarded. "Because we're the same kind of lonely. We recognize it in each other." His hand covered hers on the table, and they sat in the fluorescent diner light, two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole. The Mercer estate appeared like something from a film, iron gates opening onto a tree-lined drive that stretched for what felt like miles. The mansion emerged gradually, all stone and glass and old money, gardens manicured to impossible perfection, the ocean visible beyond manicured lawns. Olivia's intimidation must have shown on her face, because Julian's hand found her back, steady and grounding. "Together, remember." But when his family came out to greet them, Julian's entire body language changed. His spine straightened, his expression went carefully blank, and the warmth she'd grown used to vanished behind walls of ice. His mother was exactly what Olivia had feared. Margaret Mercer stood on the steps in cream linen and pearls, her silver hair perfectly styled, her expression assessing Olivia like a particularly disappointing investment. She was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful. Cold, perfect, untouchable. "Julian, you're late." No warmth, no greeting, just criticism. "Traffic," Julian replied, his voice matching.
Or hers for temperature. His father was worse. Thomas Mercer barely glanced at them, his attention on his phone, his dismissal of his son's presence so complete it felt like violence. Then, a woman, Olivia's age, bounded down the steps, ignoring her parents' disapproval, and threw her arms around Julian. He softened immediately, hugging her back with genuine affection. "Livy, this is my sister Victoria. Vic, this is Olivia." Victoria had Julian's gray-blue eyes, but warm where his were guarded, her smile genuine and relieved. Finally, someone real, thank God. She linked her arm through Olivia's conspiratorially. "We're going to survive this together. Mom's already in battle mode, Dad's pretending Julian doesn't exist, and half the guests are gossip columnists in designer clothing. It's going to be spectacular." Despite everything, Olivia liked her immediately. Their rooms were connected suites with a shared balcony overlooking the ocean. Olivia's was absurdly luxurious, all white linens and fresh flowers, but the door between their rooms felt significant, heavy with possibility and restraint. That evening, before the formal dinner, they met on the balcony. The sun was setting, painting the ocean in shades of amber and rose, and Julian had loosened his tie, looking exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. "How are you holding up?" Olivia asked. "I'd forgotten how much I hate this place." Julian's hands gripped the railing, knuckles white. "Every room has a memory of being told I wasn't enough." She moved closer, her shoulder brushing his. "Tell me something.
Why did you really stop coming here?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "When Caroline and I broke up, when I discovered the theft and the cheating, I came here. I needed my family. I was broken, humiliated. My mother said I'd embarrassed them enough with my little technology hobby. My father offered me a position in the family company if I'd sign over the patents to my work. They wanted to profit from my failure." Olivia's hand covered his, and he turned it over, lacing their fingers together. "I left with nothing," Julian continued, "rebuilt the company from zero, proved I didn't need them. But Vic was caught in the middle, and I missed 5 years of her life because my pride mattered more than she did. That's the real reason I'm here, to fix that, if I can." "That's not pride," Olivia said softly. "That's survival." He pulled her closer, and they stood watching the ocean darken, his arm around her waist, her head against his shoulder. It felt natural, inevitable, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "What would you do if money wasn't an issue?" Julian asked. "Really, details." Olivia let herself dream aloud. "I'd find a space in a neighborhood that needs beauty, not Soho or Chelsea, somewhere real, Brooklyn maybe, or Queens. The gallery would have huge windows, natural light. I'd feature one artist at a time, give them the full spotlight. The coffee shop would serve actually good coffee, and there'd be open mic nights for poets, music, whatever. Art wouldn't be something you have to be rich to experience." Julian's arm tightened around her. "How much would that cost? The space, the build-out, the first year of operations?" "Why?" "Humor me." She did the math in her head. 300,000, maybe, to do it right? He nodded slowly, like he was filing the information away, and Olivia felt simultaneously touched and terrified that he was taking her dream seriously. "Your turn," she said. "If you walked away tomorrow, what would you design first?" "A home," Julian answered immediately. "Not a house, a home. Somewhere that felt lived in, loved. Big windows, natural materials, spaces that made you want to stay. Everything my family's houses aren't." "We're quite a pair," murmured, "both wanting things we're too afraid to reach for." Julian turned her to face him, his hands framing her face in the dying light. "Maybe we're just waiting for the right reason to be brave." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was different from the one in his car, deeper, more certain. His hands slid into her hair, and hers gripped his shirt, and the ocean crashed below them like applause. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow," he said roughly, "after we survive tomorrow, we figure out what this is, really figure it out." "Tomorrow," Olivia agreed, though she was fairly certain she already knew. The morning of Thomas Mercer's 70th birthday celebration arrived with deceptive sunshine. Olivia woke to the sound of the ocean and immediate, crushing anxiety. Through the balcony doors, she could see the estate transforming. White tents bloomed across the lawn like expensive mushrooms, caterers moved with military precision, and a string quartet was setting up near the garden. She'd barely slept. The door connecting her room to Julian's had remained closed, but she'd been acutely aware of his presence on the other side, had heard him pacing at 2 a.m, the soft clink of glass that suggested whiskey and insomnia. The emerald dress fit like it had been made for her, which it essentially had. Olivia studied her reflection and saw a stranger, someone who might belong in the world downstairs. The illusion was fragile, but it would have to hold. A soft knock on the connecting door made her heart jump. "Come in." Julian entered, and the sight of him in a tuxedo made her forget how to breathe. He looked devastating, dangerous, like he'd been carved from shadows and sharp edges. But his eyes, when they found hers, held the vulnerability she'd come to recognize. "You look..." He stopped, seemed to forget English entirely. "Olivia, you're stunning." "You clean up fairly well yourself," she managed. He crossed to her, and his hands settled on her waist with a familiarity that felt both new and ancient. "My mother invited your aunt. Victoria just told me. Patricia arrives in an hour." The words hit like cold water. What? Why would she? To prove a point. That you don't belong here. She's testing you, testing us. Julian's jaw was tight with anger. My mother never does anything without strategic purpose. Olivia felt the world tilt slightly. Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong. Stop. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. These people, this world, it's beautiful and empty. You're real. Don't let them make you forget that. He offered his hand. Ready? She wasn't. She took his hand anyway. The grand staircase descended into a sea of wealth and judgment. 150 guests filled the ballroom and spilled onto the terrace, all designer clothes and inherited jewelry, all eyes turning as Julian and Olivia appeared. The whispers started immediately, a wave of speculation and assessment that made Olivia's skin prickle. Julian's hand on her back was steady, grounding. They navigated through congratulations for Thomas, false warmth from people who'd written Julian off years ago, curious stares from society columnists already composing tomorrow's gossip. Margaret Mercer held court near the garden entrance, draped in champagne silk and diamonds that could fund a small country. Her expression when she saw them was calculating, cold, a general surveying a battlefield. Julian, Miss Reed. Not Olivia, Miss Reed. The formality was deliberate, distancing. How lovely you could join us. That's quite a dress. New? It is, Olivia replied, refusing to be ashamed. How fortunate. Margaret's smile was poisonous. Julian's always been generous with his charity cases. Before Olivia could respond, before Julian could unleash what looked like building fury, a voice cut through the tension. Margaret, darling, there you are. Patricia swept into view like a designer-clad hurricane, and Olivia's stomach dropped. Her aunt wore white, which at a birthday celebration felt deliberately bridal, deliberately competitive. She air-kissed Margaret like they were old friends, which apparently they'd become. Patricia, wonderful you could make it, Margaret said warmly, a stark contrast to her ice with Olivia. We were just admiring Julian's date. The word date dripped with skepticism. Patricia's eyes landed on Olivia with gleeful malice. Oh, Olivia, what a surprise. That dress is stunning. Julian's generosity knows no bounds, doesn't it? She turned to Julian, her hand finding his arm. You've always had such a kind heart, taking care of those less fortunate. Victoria materialized beside Olivia, her presence a small fortress. Aunt Patricia, how fascinating that you're so invested in your niece's relationship, almost competitive. The barb landed. Patricia's smile froze, and Margaret's eyes sharpened with interest, sensing blood in the water but uncertain whose. Lunch was orchestrated warfare. The terrace table sat 30, and Olivia found herself positioned between Patricia and Margaret, with Julian across and several seats down, trapped in conversation with his father's business associates. The placement was strategic, isolating her from her only ally. The interrogation began before the first course arrived. So, Miss Reed, where did you attend university? Margaret's tone was polite, her interest surgical. State school, Olivia answered. I majored in art history. How practical. The judgment was implicit. Margaret turned to Patricia. And you raised her after her parents passed? How noble. Someone had to, Patricia said, her voice dripping false martyrdom. Poor thing, had nowhere to go. No life insurance, you understand. Her parents were rather irresponsible about planning. The word irresponsible, applied to people who died in a car accident, made Olivia's vision blur with rage. Her parents hadn't been irresponsible. They'd been unlucky. They'd been killed by a drunk driver on a Tuesday afternoon. That she couldn't defend them without causing a scene. And causing a scene was exactly what these women wanted. Tragic, Margaret murmured, but her eyes held no sympathy, only calculation. And now you work at a gallery? Assistant manager, Patricia mentioned. I do. How quaint. A girl with a real job. The condescension was exquisite. each word a paper cut. Other guests were watching now, the society wives sensing entertainment, their attention razor sharp. Olivia felt stripped, exposed, every inadequacy on display. Patricia leaned in, her voice carrying just far enough. Of course, Julian's probably just being kind. He's always had a soft spot for charity cases. Remember that girl from Brooklyn, Margaret? What was her name? Caroline. And Olivia recognized the name, Julian's ex-fiancé. That lasted all of 3 months once she realized he was serious about that technology hobby. The implication was clear. Olivia was temporary, forgettable, another in a line of women who wouldn't last once Julian came to his senses. Across the table, Julian had gone rigid. He'd heard every word, and the fury in his gray-blue eyes was volcanic. He started to stand, but his father's hand clamped on his shoulder, forcing
him back down, and Olivia watched him struggle between causing a scene and staying silent. "I think," Olivia said quietly, surprised by the steadiness in her voice, "that my parents loved me enough to make every day count. They weren't thinking about death because they were too busy living. If that's irresponsible, I'll take it over spending your life calculating every relationship like a business merger." The table went silent. Patricia's face flushed with rage. Margaret's expression turned glacial. Victoria, several seats down, raised her glass with a grin. Well said. But the moment was broken by Julian pushing away from the table with enough force that his chair scraped violently against stone. "Olivia, walk with me." It wasn't a request. He was across the terrace in 3 strides, his hand extended, his expression brooking no argument. Olivia took it, aware of every eye following them as they escaped down the garden path toward the private beach. "I'm sorry," she started the moment they were out of earshot. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't you dare apologize." Julian's voice shook with suppressed fury. "Don't you dare apologize for defending your parents against that vicious—" He cut himself off, hands curling into fists. They'd reached the beach, sand giving way beneath Olivia's heels. She slipped them off, and Julian did the same with his expensive shoes, and they stood at the water's edge like refugees from a war. "She's right, though," Olivia said, her earlier bravery crumbling. "Your mother's right. I don't belong here." "Thank God." Julian turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "This place is beautiful and poisonous. I don't want you to belong here. I want—" He stopped, something vulnerable and terrified crossing his face. "What?" Olivia whispered. "What do you want?" "You," he said simply. "I want you. Not the version that would fit here, not some polished, appropriate partner. Just you. The woman who sees beauty in broken things, who defends emerging artists, who altered a vintage dress because she'd rather be authentic than acceptable." The ocean wind caught Olivia's hair, and Julian's hand came up to tuck it behind her ear, his touch reverent. "This was supposed to be simple," she said, her voice breaking. "An arrangement." "It stopped being simple the moment I met you." His forehead touched hers. "Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me I'm alone in this, and I'll walk away." She couldn't. The truth was terrifying and undeniable. "I'm scared." "Me too." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of this." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the careful kisses before. This was desperate, honest, stripped of pretense. His hands tangled in her hair, and hers gripped his jacket, and they kissed like they were drowning and each other was air. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the real world crashed back. They had to return to the party, had to face his family, her aunt, the judgment and performance. "Tonight," Julian said, his voice rough. "After this circus is over, we talk, really talk, figure out what happens next." "Tonight," Olivia agreed. They walked back up the beach path hand in hand, and Olivia tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. But when they crested the hill and the terrace came into view, Patricia stood at the railing,
watching them with an expression of such pure hatred that Olivia stumbled. Julian steadied her. "Together," he murmured. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." Patricia descended the steps to meet them, and her smile was a blade in silk wrapping. "There you are. We were worried. Julian, your mother wants you for photos. Family only, I'm afraid." Her eyes slid to Olivia with venomous satisfaction. "You understand, dear." Julian's jaw clenched. "Actually—" "It's fine," Olivia interrupted, though it wasn't. "Go, I'll wait." She watched him walk back toward the house, his reluctance evident in every step, and then she was alone with Patricia. "You think you've won something," Patricia said quietly, the false sweetness evaporating. "But men like Julian don't end up with girls like you. You're a novelty, a rebellion. Once he's proven whatever point he's making to his family, he'll move on." "You're wrong," Olivia said, but her voice shook. "Am I? I was at lunch. I heard the way Margaret spoke about you. That's how his world sees you. And eventually, he'll see you the same way." Patricia stepped closer, her perfume cloying. "You're a project, sweetheart, and projects get finished." Patricia's words burrowed under Olivia's skin like splinters. She stood on the terrace, watching the party continue around her, feeling invisible again. A project. The phrase echoed with the particular cruelty of truths wrapped in malice. She thought about the boutique, the careful grooming, the strategic positioning at events. What if Patricia was right? What if she was just Julian's rebellion, his way of proving something to parents who'd never valued him? The afternoon blurred into evening. The party migrated from terrace to ballroom as the sun descended, and Olivia found herself adrift in a sea of people who looked through her like she was glass. Julian was trapped in an endless reception line, shaking hands with his father's business associates, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes finding hers across the room, every few minutes, checking if she was still there. Victoria appeared with 2 glasses of champagne. "You look like you need this." Is it that obvious? Only to people who aren't monsters. Victoria handed her a glass. "My mother's in rare form tonight, and your aunt is something else entirely. Where does Julian find these toxic family situations?" "I think they find him," Olivia murmured. "She's wrong, you know. Patricia, whatever she said to you on the terrace, it's wrong." Victoria's eyes were kind, knowing. "I've never seen my brother like this. He looks at you like you're the only real thing in a room full of props." Before Olivia could respond, Margaret's voice cut through the ambient noise. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please." The ballroom quieted. Margaret stood on the small stage where the band had been setting up, microphone in hand, her smile sharp as diamonds. "I want to thank you all for celebrating my husband's 70th birthday. Family means everything to us, as I'm sure you all know." The emphasis on family was deliberate, pointed. Julian had gone rigid, his jaw clenched. "It's been wonderful to see Julian again after so long," Margaret continued, her gaze finding her son in the crowd, "and to meet his latest companion, though I must say we were all surprised by the choice. So different from what we expected. But Julian's always been rather impulsive, hasn't he? Remember that technology phase we all thought would pass?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, cruel and knowing. Olivia felt her face burn. This was public humiliation as performance art, and she was the punchline. Patricia appeared beside Margaret like they'd choreographed it. "May I?" She took the microphone, and Olivia's stomach plummeted. "I just wanted to add how proud I am of my niece, Olivia. She's come so far from that scared 19-year-old I took in. Working at her little gallery, making something of herself despite everything. And now here she is at this beautiful estate." Patricia's smile was venomous. "Though I do hope people understand the nature of their arrangement. Julian's been so generous, hasn't he? Paying off debts, buying clothes. He's always been charitable." The word arrangement landed like a bomb. Whispers exploded across the ballroom. Olivia watched realization dawn on faces around her, watched respect curdle into speculation and pity. They thought she was being paid, thought this was transactional. The truth was complicated, but Patricia had weaponized it, made it ugly. Julian was moving through the crowd toward the stage, his expression murderous. But Margaret spoke first. "Well, this has been enlightening." Her smile was satisfied, victorious. "Julian, darling, perhaps we should discuss appropriate behavior later, privately." Olivia couldn't breathe. The ballroom walls were closing in, every eye on her, judging, dismissing. She needed air, needed escape, needed to not exist for a moment. She pushed through the crowd toward the nearest exit, barely registering Victoria calling her name. She made it to the garden before the tears started, hot and humiliating. The string quartet was playing something mournful, and she wanted to laugh at the appropriateness. This was what she got for believing in fairy tales, for thinking someone like her could exist in someone like Julian's world. "Olivia, wait!" Julian caught her near the hedge maze, his hand gentle on her arm. She spun to face him, and whatever he saw in her expression made him go pale. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't tell me it doesn't matter. Don't tell me they're wrong. They're not. This started as a transaction. You paid for my presence. That's the truth." "That's not." Julian's hands came up, desperate, but she stepped back. "Your mother is right. I don't belong here. I will never belong here. And eventually, you'll see what they see. A project, a charity case, someone who needed saving. Stop." His voice cracked. "You think I care what they think? You think any of this matters to me? It should." Olivia's anger surprised them both. "These are your parents, your world, and I'm the thing that doesn't fit, that will always be explained away or apologized for." "My parents are poison," Julian said, his voice raw. "This world is poison. I left it 5 years ago because I'd rather have nothing than be part of this." He stepped closer, and she couldn't make herself retreat again. "You want to know why I really came back? Why I subjected myself to this? Because Victoria asked. Because she's the only person in that house who ever loved me without conditions. But you?" He stopped, something breaking across his face. "You what?" Olivia whispered. "You make me want to be brave," Julian said quietly. "You make me want things I thought I'd buried. You make me believe I could be something other than the company I built or the family I escaped. And that terrifies me, because everyone I've ever cared about has used that against me." Olivia's anger crumbled, leaving only the fear underneath. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person you need. I don't need you to be anyone but yourself." Julian's hands framed her face, his touch achingly gentle. "Olivia, I'm in love with you." The words hung between them, impossible and true. The world seemed to stop, the music fading, the party distant as another universe. "You can't be," she breathed. Too late. His smile was shaky, vulnerable. "I fell for you the moment you started talking about that abstract painting, when your whole face lit up. I fell harder when you defended your parents against Patricia. I'm completely gone, and I don't want to come back." Olivia's hands covered his, and she could feel him trembling. "Julian?" A slow clap echoed from behind them. Patricia emerged from the shadows, and Olivia realized with sinking horror that she'd followed them. Worse, behind her stood Margaret, and behind Margaret, half the party guests, drawn by the promise of drama. "How touching," Patricia said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent garden. "A real declaration of love. Though I wonder what everyone would think if they knew this whole relationship started as a business arrangement. Oh wait, they already know. I made sure of it." Julian's entire body went rigid. "Get away from us." "Or what?" Patricia's eyes glittered with malice. "You'll pay me off too?
Is that how you solve all your problems, Julian? Throw money at them until they go away? Margaret stepped forward, her expression triumphant. I think we've all seen enough. Julian, this spectacle has gone on long enough. It's time to end this farce and discuss your future properly, without audience. My future is none of your business, Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. I left this family 5 years ago. Nothing's changed. Everything's changed, Margaret countered. You've embarrassed us, again. First with that company, now with this girl. Her name is Olivia. Julian's hand found Olivia's, gripping tight. And she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. The crowd had grown. Olivia could see camera phones raised, society columnists recording every word. This would be tomorrow's gossip, her humiliation immortalized in social media and tabloids. Julian, don't, she whispered. Not like this, not for me. He turned to her, and his expression was fierce, certain, especially for you. He raised his voice, addressing the crowd that had gathered like vultures. Since everyone seems so interested in my personal life, let me be clear. Yes, Olivia and I started with an arrangement. I offered to help her. She agreed to attend events. It was transactional, safe. Olivia wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground. But Julian's hand held hers, anchoring. But somewhere between the first gallery opening and tonight, I fell completely in love with her, Julian continued, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. She's brilliant, passionate, real, in a way none of you understand. She sees people, not portfolios. She values art over investment returns. She's everything this world isn't, and I thank God for that. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Margaret's face had gone white with fury. Patricia looked ready to combust. Julian, you can't be serious, Margaret started. I've never been more serious about anything, he interrupted. And if that embarrasses you, if that's not appropriate for your social circles, I genuinely don't care. I stopped caring what you thought 5 years ago when you chose status over your own son. Thomas Mercer pushed through the crowd, his face thunderous. If you walk away from this family again, you're done. No inheritance, no name, nothing. I don't want your inheritance, Julian said flatly. I don't want your name. I've built everything I have without you, and I'll keep building. The only thing I want from this family is Victoria's forgiveness from missing so many years. Everything else can burn. He turned to Olivia, and his gray-blue eyes held nothing but certainty. I love you. Not the arrangement, not the convenience. You. Your terrible coffee addiction, your passion for emerging artists, the way you altered that vintage dress because you'd rather be authentic than acceptable. You make me want to be better, braver. You make me believe I could build something real instead of just successful. Tears were streaming down Olivia's face, and she didn't care who saw. You just destroyed your family for me. I destroyed a prison, Julian corrected. Then he was kissing her, in front of his parents and her aunt and 150 witnesses, kissing her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Olivia kissed him back, pouring every complicated feeling into it. And distantly she heard applause, Victoria's voice whooping encouragement, the click of cameras immortalizing the moment. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the world had shifted. Margaret stood frozen, her carefully constructed evening in ruins. Patricia was being escorted toward the exit, her protests shrill and ignored. Thomas had already disappeared, his final disappointment delivered. Only Victoria remained nearby, grinning through happy tears. About damn time. Now get out of here before Mom regroups. Julian didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed Olivia's hand, and they ran through the garden like teenagers, her heels abandoned somewhere on the lawn, his tie loosened, both of them laughing with the giddy relief of people who'd survived something terrible together.
They made it to his car, and he drove too fast down the estate's long driveway, putting distance between them and the wreckage. Only when the gates closed behind them did he pull over, hands shaking on the steering wheel. "I just blew up my entire family," he said, the reality settling in. "For me," Olivia whispered, still unable to process it. "For us." Julian turned to her, and his smile was tentative, hopeful. "If there is an us, if you want there to be, because that wasn't just performance back there. I meant every word." Olivia leaned across the console and kissed him, soft and certain. They sat in the car as the sun finally set, both processing what had just happened, what it meant, where they went from here. Everything was complicated. Everything was terrifying.
Wang was perfect. 2 weeks passed. 14 days that felt like 14 years, each one identical in its misery. Olivia sat in her studio apartment, staring at the email confirmation she'd received the morning after the estate disaster. Student loans, paid in full. Balance, 0. Below it, another message. Rent covered through the year, the difference in increase handled. Julian had honored every part of their arrangement, even as everything fell apart. She hadn't spoken to him since that night in the car. The silence had started as her choice, made in the gray light of dawn the next morning, as the reality of what had happened settled like concrete in her chest. Julian had destroyed his family relationships for her, in front of witnesses, on impulse, fueled by emotion and public humiliation. What if he regretted it? What if, in a week, a month, a year, he resented her for being the reason he was estranged from his parents? So she'd texted him, "I need time to think. Please give me space." His response had been immediate. How much space? She hadn't known how to answer, so she hadn't answered at all. The gallery felt different now, though nothing had actually changed. Olivia still curated exhibitions Hartwell took credit for, still arranged champagne flutes and answered questions, still barely made enough, despite the financial relief Julian's payments had provided. But she moved through it like a ghost, going through motions that no longer meant anything. Wesley cornered her during a quiet afternoon, his expression a mix of concern and exasperation. "Okay, that's it. You've been a zombie for 2 weeks. Talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about. You're in love with a billionaire who publicly declared his love for you, and you're moping around like someone died. That's definitely something to talk about." Olivia set down the catalog she'd been pretending to review. "He destroyed his family for me, Wes, on impulse. What if he wakes up one day and realizes I wasn't worth it?" "Then he's an idiot," Wesley said bluntly. "But from what you've told me, he's not. He's a man who's been used and manipulated his whole life, who found someone real and chose her over people who've never actually loved him. That's not impulse. That's courage." But courage felt terrifying when you were the reason it was needed. That evening, Olivia received a text from an unknown number. "This is Victoria, Julian's sister. We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow? I'm not taking no for an answer." They met at a small cafe in the West Village, far from anywhere society might notice. Victoria looked tired, worried, and determined. "He's a disaster," she said without preamble. "Working 18-hour days, not sleeping, barely eating. He's texted you, hasn't he?" Olivia nodded. Julian had sent messages, not demanding, not angry, just quiet check-ins that made her chest ache. "How are you? Thinking of you. Take the time you need." Each one she'd read a dozen times before not responding, paralyzed by fear and want in equal measure. "He won't tell me what happened after you left the estate," Victoria continued. "But I can guess. You're scared. You think what he did was too much, too fast, too public. You think he'll regret choosing you over them." "Won't he?" Olivia's voice cracked. "Our parents are toxic," Victoria said flatly. "They made Julian feel worthless his entire life unless he was being who they wanted. He's happier estranged from them than he ever was in that house. You didn't take anything from him. You gave him permission to finally walk away."
But Olivia couldn't shake the fear, couldn't silence Patricia's voice in her head, calling her a project, a phase, something temporary, dressed up as permanent. On the 18th day, Julian requested a meeting through Victoria. Professional, his office, 10 a.m. Olivia almost didn't go, but she owed him a conversation at minimum, owed him the courtesy of an actual ending, if that's what this was. She dressed carefully, armor of her own making, and took the train to his building in Midtown. The office was everything she'd expected: glass and steel, minimalist and expensive, with a view that made the city look like a toy. Julian stood by the window, his back to the door, and when he turned, Olivia's breath caught. Victoria was right. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his shirt slightly rumpled like he'd slept in his office. But when he saw her, something in his expression cracked open before he carefully controlled it. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice professionally neutral in a way that hurt more than anger would have. "Of course." He gestured to the conference table, and she sat, feeling like she was in a job interview for a position she'd already been fired from. Julian sat across from her, not beside her, the distance deliberate and devastating. "I wanted to fulfill our final obligation," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a check. Not for student loans or rent, which he'd already handled. This was for the amount they'd originally discussed, payment for her time, attending events. "Julian, you don't have to." "A deal's a deal," he interrupted, and his voice was carefully empty. "This makes us even." Even? Like they could be reduced to a transaction. Like the past month hadn't happened. Like his declaration in the garden had been erased. Olivia looked at the check and felt something shatter inside her chest. "Is that all?" she managed. "Unless you have questions about the payment schedule?" His gray-blue eyes met hers, and she could see the pain he was trying so hard to hide beneath professional courtesy. "Your rent is handled through the year as agreed. The loans are cleared. I believe that concludes our arrangement." The word arrangement landed like a slap. This was what she'd asked for, wasn't it? Space, distance, time to think. But having it felt like drowning. Olivia stood, the check trembling in her hand. "Thank you for everything." Julian stood as well, and for a moment they faced each other across the conference table, and Olivia wanted to scream, to take back every text she'd never sent, every day she'd wasted being afraid. But the walls were back up in his expression, the careful control that said he wouldn't be hurt by her again. "I hope the gallery treats you well," he said quietly. "You deserve recognition for your work." Then she was leaving, walking through his office, past assistants who didn't meet her eyes, into an elevator that felt like a coffin. She made it to the street before the tears started. 3 days later, Marcus called. Marcus, her ex from college, the architect who'd chosen Boston over her 3 years ago. He'd seen the society photos from the estate party, had looked her up, wanted to reconnect. His voice on the phone was familiar, safe, uncomplicated. "I made a mistake leaving," he said over coffee, in a generic chain cafe that was the opposite of everywhere Julian had taken her. "We were good together, Liv. Stable. Real." Real. The word echoed hollowly. What she'd had with Julian had been real, right up until it became terrifying. Marcus was handsome in an accessible way, successful but not intimidating, from her world instead of some unreachable stratosphere. He told her about the architecture firm in Boston, about a gallery position that was opening up, about how they could try again, do it right this time. "Think about it," he said, his hand covering hers across the table. "Fresh start. Leave all this New York chaos behind." Wesley's reaction when she told him was immediate and scathing. "You don't love him. You're running." "I'm being practical," Olivia insisted. "Julian was a fantasy. Marcus is reality." "Julian is a man who loves you. Marcus is a consolation prize you're settling for because you're too scared to fight for what you actually want." But fear felt safer than hope. Fear was familiar. On Friday evening, exactly 3 weeks after the estate, Olivia agreed to have dinner with Marcus. A real date, he'd called it. A chance to see if they could recapture what they'd had. She was getting ready when her phone rang. Victoria, frantic. "Where are you right now?" "Home. Why?" "Julian knows. About Marcus, about dinner tonight. He saw something on social media. I don't know. But Olivia, I've never seen him like this. He left the office mid-meeting. I think he's coming to find you." Olivia's heart stopped. "What? Why would he?" "Because he's in love with you, you stubborn idiot. And he's watching you date someone else. What did you think would happen?" 20 minutes later, Olivia stood outside the restaurant where she was supposed to meet Marcus, her phone showing several missed calls from a blocked number. She was about to text Marcus that she'd be late when a town car pulled up with enough force to make the tires screech. Julian emerged like a storm, his hair disheveled, his tie loosened, his expression raw in a way she'd never seen. He spotted her on the sidewalk and froze, and the look on his face was devastation barely contained. "Is this what you want?" His voice was rough, wrecked. "Safe? Boring? Someone who'd never challenge you, never see you for the extraordinary person you are?" "Julian, what are you—" "I gave you space. I honored what you asked for. I paid what we agreed, closed the arrangement, gave you every out." He was close now, and she could see the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly. "But I can't watch you settle for someone who doesn't deserve you. I can't do it." "You don't get to do this," Olivia said, anger rising. "You don't get to disappear behind walls and professional courtesy and then show up when I'm trying to move on." "I disappeared because you asked me to," Julian's control cracked. "You wanted space. You wanted time. What was I supposed to do? Beg? Chase you when you'd made it clear you needed distance?" "Yes," the word ripped out of her. "I needed you to fight for me, not treat me like a closed business deal." They stared at each other on the sidewalk, both breathing hard. 3 weeks of misery and miscommunication between them. People were starting to notice, phones coming out, but neither of them cared. "Tell me you love him," Julian said, quietly, desperately. "Look me in the eye and tell me you feel for Marcus what you felt with me, and I'll walk away forever." Olivia opened her mouth, closed it. The silence was damning. "That's what I thought." Julian's voice broke. "You're terrified. I get it. Everyone you've ever loved or died, but I'm here. I showed up. I'm showing up right now, making a complete fool of myself in public again, because the thought of you with someone else is killing me. You destroyed your family for me. What if you regret it? What if I'm not worth—" "Stop." He closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face with devastating gentleness. "You are worth everything. My family was toxic long before you. You didn't take anything from me. You saved me." Olivia's tears were falling freely now, and Julian's thumbs brushed them away with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "I love you," he said. "I'm in love with you, and if you don't feel the same, if this really is just fear, tell me now. But if there's any part of you that wants this, that wants us, don't throw it away because you're scared. We can be scared together." Behind them, Marcus emerged from the restaurant, took one look at the scene, and wisely retreated. Olivia laughed through her tears. "I'm terrified of how much I love you." Julian's expression transformed, hope breaking through the devastation. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She kissed him, urgent and certain, and he lifted her slightly off the ground, his arms wrapping around her like he'd never let go. They stood on the sidewalk, wrapped around each other like survivors of a shipwreck, and Olivia felt the fear that had been suffocating her for 3 weeks finally release its grip. Julian was shaking slightly, his face buried in her hair, and she realized he'd been just as terrified as she was. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his chest. "I'm so sorry. I was scared and stupid and—" "I should have fought harder," Julian interrupted. "Should have shown up sooner. I thought giving you space meant letting you go, but it just meant we were both miserable separately instead of figuring this out together." She pulled back enough to see his face, and the vulnerability there made her heart ache. "I love you. I've been falling since that first night on the fire escape, and it terrified me because everyone I've ever loved, I know." His forehead touched hers. But I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. I'm annoyingly persistent when I want something. What do you want? Olivia asked, though she thought she knew. Everything, Julian said simply. I want coffee in the mornings and arguments about art. I want to watch you build your gallery and support every crazy dream you have. I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up knowing you're still there. I want messy and complicated and real. Olivia kissed him again, softer this time, a promise instead of desperation. I want that too, all of it. A throat cleared behind them. They turned to find Marcus standing a careful distance away, his expression resigned but not unkind. I'm guessing dinner's canceled, he said with a wry smile. Marcus, I'm so sorry, Olivia started. Don't be. He looked at Julian, then back at her. I wanted easy, safe, but you deserve the kind of love that makes people show up on sidewalks and make fools of themselves. Good luck, Liv. He walked away, and Olivia felt a pang of guilt that was already fading into relief. Marcus had been right. She both did. Julian's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it and winced. Victoria. She's panicking. I may have left a board meeting rather dramatically. You have to go back. I really don't. But his hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. Come with me. We can order terrible takeout and figure out what happens next. What happened next was his penthouse, Thai food eaten straight from containers, and the kind of conversation that lasted until 3 in the morning. They talked about everything. The 3 weeks apart, the fear that had driven Olivia away, Julian's terror that he'd pushed too hard at the estate. They talked about his family, and Olivia admitted she'd been convinced his declaration was impulse, that he'd regret it. It wasn't impulse, Julian said quietly, his arm around her on the couch, her head on his shoulder. I'd been in love with you for weeks. The garden just forced me to stop being a coward about it. You're not a coward. I treated you like a business arrangement when you were never that. I tried to control the situation because control felt safe. He pressed a kiss to her temple. But you were right to call me on it, to demand more. They fell asleep there, tangled together, and when Olivia woke to sunrise flooding the penthouse, Julian was already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest tight. What? She murmured. Just memorizing this, he said, in case I'm dreaming. Not dreaming. She kissed him, morning breath and all, and his arms tightened around her. 2 days later, Julian called her with barely contained excitement. Meet me at the corner of Hudson and Perry Street, 1 hour. That's very mysterious. Trust me. The address was in the West Village, a neighborhood Olivia had always loved for its tree-lined streets and artistic history. When she arrived, Julian was standing in front of an empty storefront, keys in hand, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen. What is this? She asked. Your dream, or the beginning of it. He unlocked the door, and they stepped into a space with huge windows, exposed brick, beautiful bones beneath years of neglect. 3,000 square feet. The upstairs has an apartment, small but functional, and there's room in back for a coffee shop. Olivia's heart started racing. Julian, what did you do? I bought the building, he said quickly before she could panic. But he held up his hands. The deed is in your name, not mine, yours. The gallery is yours. You run it, you curate it, you make every decision. I'm just an investor, a silent one, if you want. She stared at him, speechless. The space was perfect. Light pouring through the windows, enough room for intimate exhibitions, the neighborhood right. Everything she'd described on that balcony at the estate materialized. This is insane, she whispered. I also contacted a contractor, Julian continued, words tumbling out nervously. Victoria helped design the coffee shop layout, and the apartment upstairs has a working heater, unlike your studio, and I know you're independent, but I worry, so I thought... Olivia kissed him to stop the anxious rambling. When she pulled back, his expression was hopeful and terrified. This is too much, she said. His face fell. I can return it. I just wanted... Let me finish. She cupped his face, making him look at her. This is too much, and it's perfect. And I love you so much I can barely breathe. But I need you to understand something. I'm paying rent. What? If we're partners, we're equals. I'm paying rent for the apartment. Maybe discounted rent, she conceded when he opened his mouth to argue, but rent. And the gallery succeeds or fails on my work, not your money. You can invest, but I make the decisions, all of them. A slow smile spread across Julian's face. You're going to be stubborn about this. Absolutely. I love you so much, he said, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in the empty gallery. Over the following months, second chances took shape. Olivia quit Hartwell with a resignation letter that was professionally courteous and personally satisfying. The build-out happened in stages. Walls painted in warm neutrals, track lighting installed to showcase art properly, the coffee bar taking shape and back with an espresso machine Julian insisted on but put in her name. They argued about everything: paint colors, artist selections, whether the opening needed champagne or if coffee was more on brand. Julian tried to be silent investor and failed spectacularly, showing up at the construction site with suggestions that Olivia sometimes took and sometimes overruled. But the arguments never felt like the ones with his family. These were passionate, creative, two people who cared deeply, working towards something together. Victoria became an unexpected ally, helping with design choices and using her society connections to drum up interest. My mother will hate this, she said gleefully during a planning session, which means it's perfect. They didn't hear from Patricia again. She'd apparently moved to Miami, chasing another wealthy prospect, and Olivia felt only relief at her absence. Some family was worth fighting for, some wasn't. Julian's parents sent a formal letter through lawyers, essentially disowning him again, which he read once and filed away without comment. Their loss, was all he said, but Olivia saw the flash of pain before he buried it. She held him that night, and he finally let himself grieve the parents he'd never actually had. 6 months after that night on the sidewalk, Second Chances opened its doors. The first exhibition featured 5 emerging artists, all from difficult backgrounds, all hungry and talented. The coffee shop served actually good coffee and hosted open mic nights twice a week. The neighborhood showed up in force, and so did unexpected faces from the art world, drawn by word of mouth and genuine excitement. Olivia stood in her gallery, surrounded by people, and felt something she hadn't felt in years: pride. This was hers. She'd built it. Yes, with help, with support, with Julian's investment. But every choice, every artist, every detail had been her decision, her vision realized. Julian watched from the corner, no need to be center stage, pride evident in his expression. Wesley materialized beside him. You know she's going to be more successful than you, right? Wesley said. Julian's smile was soft, genuine. I'm counting on it. Olivia crossed to them, paint on her hands from last-minute touch-ups, exhausted and radiant. Thank you for being here. There's nowhere else I'd be, Julian said. The same words from months ago, still true. Victoria joined them, pulling Olivia into a hug. You did it. This is incredible. We did it, Olivia corrected, including all of them in the pronoun. As evening settled and the crowd thinned, Julian and Olivia escaped to the small balcony off the apartment upstairs. The city spread below them, alive with possibility, and Julian's arms wrapped around her from behind. I never thought I could have this, Olivia whispered. You built it, Julian corrected. I just held the ladder. She turned in his arms, and the love in his expression still took her breath away, even after months. We built it, together. Together, he agreed, and kissed her as the city lights flickered on like promises. Below them, Second Chances Gallery glowed warm and welcoming, a space for art and community and people who needed to believe in second chances. Which, Olivia thought, as Julian held her close, was all of them. Everyone deserved the chance to rebuild, to start over, to choose love over fear. She'd chosen love. The scary, messy, complicated kind that required showing up and being vulnerable and fighting for what mattered. And standing on that balcony with Julian, their gallery thriving below, their future unwritten but shared, Olivia finally understood what her grandmother's locket had always meant. Home wasn't a place. It was the person who saw you completely and loved you anyway. It was choosing each other, every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. "What are you thinking?" Julian murmured against her hair. "That I'm home," Olivia said simply. His arms tightened around her. "Yeah, me too." And in the warm glow of the gallery they'd built together, surrounded by art and possibility and hard-won happiness, they stayed there. Two people who'd been lost, finding themselves in each other, proving that sometimes the best love stories were the ones that started as something else and became everything that mattered. The end.